Well, there's a very, very important race in Nebraska, as there are in other states, in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate. And there's an outstanding candidate, a solid conservative, a constitutionalist, who is running, and his name is Ben Sasse, spelled S-A-S-S-E, and he has a really good shot at winning the Republican primary, first and foremost. 4 months ago, he had 3% name ID, excuse me. Now he has 40% name ID, which is really, really good. And he's a man that I have great admiration for, and I wanted to introduce him to you. Ben Sasse, how are you, sir?
Great, Mark. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Now, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the country and tell people a little bit about your background and what your main issues are.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a 41-year-old non-politician. Most of my background has been in the private sector doing crisis management and business turnarounds, but I'm now in my 5th year as college president in my hometown, a 130-year-old college that was trying to go broke, and we've now been fixing it, and we're the fastest-growing school in the Midwest. But I think the main thing I think of myself as is I'm a dad and a father. I got 3 little kids, and my wife and I are blessed to be raising them a mile from where I grew up, and we want them to inherit a great, free, opportunity-filled America, and we got a mess on our hands.
We do have a mess on our hands, and, you know, we have a mess within the Republican Party. So, you know, when I start talking about candidates and getting behind candidates, it's very, very important to me that the people that I endorse are going to be principled and do what they say they're going to do once they get to the Senate. Would that be you?
Yes, sir. I mean, we have an obligation to recover the Constitution, and it's under assault. And the only reason I'm doing this is because if we lose the constitutional protections as are evaporating on us seemingly by the week right now, our kids grow up in a scary, less free, less opportunity-filled world.
Obamacare is a huge threat to this nation, both for health care reasons, but more than that, for constitutional reasons and so forth. Would it be a major priority, if not the priority of yours, to get rid of that law?
Yeah, I mean, it's why I'm running. It's a 2,300-page piece of junk that Speaker Pelosi said they had to pass so they could finally figure out what was in it. I've read it. 2009 was a slow period in my life, so I actually read the bill, and it's disastrous. It's worse than the public understands. And as you rightly put it, it isn't just an attack on budget honesty and the doctor-patient relationship and religious liberty. It's a fundamental attack on the American constitutional system of government because it's a big pile of paper that the administration just rewrites every time they want to at their whim.
You're being supported by a lot of different groups and organizations in the state of Nebraska. What do you think of the Tea Party movement?
Yeah, I'm delighted that we have the Tea Party folks introduce an urgency. I mean, you said it a minute ago. We don't just have a crisis in the country. We have a crisis in the Republican Party and in the conservative movement as well, because we're losing. We're losing our ability to persuade the middle of the electorate. We're losing our ability to pass on an understanding of the meaning of America to the next generation, and the Tea Party is filled with folks who are wanting to ask those first principles questions. What does it mean that we, the people, give the government a certain limited number of authorities? The establishment insiders don't give us our rights. God gave us our rights, and we, the people, come together to secure them. And the Tea Party is rightly standing up and screaming about that stuff.
Have there been organizations, national conservative organizations, that have endorsed your campaign?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate. We have the Senate Conservative Funds, the Club for Growth, redstate.com. We got a range of folks across the populist conservative movement. Paul Ryan has also endorsed us, and we're fortunate that the National Review put our campaign on the cover this week. I think it's only the 3rd time in their history that they've put a candidate on the cover of the National Review magazine. So there's a good group coming together saying we need to fight and we need to rally the conservative movement.
If you were a senator and you have 48 to 72 hours to vote on a 1,500-page appropriation bill or a 2,300-page Obamacare bill or something of that sort, as a matter of principle, would you vote for a bill that you've never read?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you have any authority to pass laws that take away people's hard-earned money that they're trying to put food on the table for their kids and take away their freedoms and pass mandates and penalties when you don't know what's in it. I don't know. I don't understand what they think their job actually is. You know, depending on what font you use when you print out your Constitution on the computer, it's about a dozen pages. Or the Homestead Act of 1862, one of the most significant pieces of legislation in American history, just under 2 pages. They pass these lobbyist pork bills of thousands of pages, and they don't even read them. I don't know what they think their job is.
Do you find yourself more in the camp of a Ted Cruz and a Mike Lee and a Rand Paul and so forth, or more in the camp of a Susan Collins and what else, and Lindsey Graham and so forth?
Yeah. The former, obviously. I mean, I am so grateful for some of those guys that are coming in and having the courage to tell the honest truth that the house is on fire. Washington is a fundamentally broken place, and we have an obligation to recover it for our kids. There's never been a republic for 300 years before. We're 240 years into this experiment. It's in peril, and the people in Washington feel really content to just fiddle while Rome burns. And I'm grateful for Cruz and Lee and Rand Paul and people like that are willing to stand up and say, we got a big problem here. We need to fix it.
I'm talking to Ben Sasse, spelled S-A-S-S-E, in Nebraska, running in the Republican primary for the Senate. He's a gentleman who's been supported by the vast majority Tea Party groups and conservative national groups and so forth. Couple more questions, if I may. Do you consider the debt in this country a #1 priority, and would you continue, like others, to keep voting for increasing the debt ceiling without finding some kind of pathway to address this?
Yeah, I mean, we're guilty of generational theft right now, and we need to recognize that this is not a stable path, and it's not a moral path. And when we're debating even these numbers going from 14 trillion to 16 trillion to 17 trillion, the more fundamental issue is that we have around $70 trillion of total obligations of the U.S. government. They just keep phony books. They move most of the entitlement obligations off book. And so right now, the conversations we're having, which occasionally are a little bit serious about the debt, are really not even accounting for the real reality of the entitlement overpromising that politicians are doing in Washington. And the House is on fire, and we need to fix it. We can't just passively keep kicking the can down the road and say, well, at some point, 2, 3, 4 years from now, then we'll get serious about it. These people haven't been serious about it for decades, and the time to fix these things is when you can do it by leadership, not when Greek-style austerity crisis forces it on you.
I want to ask you about immigration. Do you agree that it is crucial that we secure the border first before we entertain all these ideas about pathway to citizenship and legalization and so forth?
Absolutely. I mean, a government's fundamental duty, why we chartered together as a people at the end of the 18th century to establish a federal government, was to protect us from enemies foreign and domestic. And if you're not securing a border, you're not protecting the American people, and you're not doing your fundamental first principles job in Washington. And these people love to dally and argue and go to cocktail parties and negotiate priority 141 versus 143, but fundamental duty of the government is defense and border security.
So I want to be absolutely clear. So you believe the border must be secured first, not down the road as part of a combination of issues, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, you know what, sir? I'm going to endorse you because I've looked deeply into your background. I have listened to what you've said. I've talked to a number of people who I have great admiration for and trust in. You agree that the border needs to be secured first. You agree who, if, in your view, some of the more outstanding senators are. You've said you won't vote for these massive bills if you don't have an opportunity to actually know what's in them and read them. And there's really no other way for me to vet you other than to do it this way. We've never met. We've never talked before. So let me ask you this. Your main opponent in the Republican primary, how would you describe that person?
I'm going to duck a little bit, only because I'm not running against people. I'm running for the future of our kids and grandkids. But I think if things worked well in Washington, then business as usual could work. But it doesn't work, and right now I am definitely not the lobbyist choice, and my main opposition is the lobbyist choice. And so I don't talk much about the other candidates in my race. I talk about what we believe in a constitutional system, and business as usual isn't working, so we need to fix it.
So the other candidate, I'm reading, not even between the lines, I just heard you, is somebody who is supported by K Street in Washington. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I've been told multiple times that I am not, and I'm putting this in scare quotes, I am not reliable, that I would just vote the way folks wanted us to vote on whatever issue of the day big business was pushing. And I'm not running because of some constituency of corporate elites in Washington buying a bunch of lobbyists. I'm running because of the kids and nephews and nieces in my neighborhood that have inherited something great, but that we need to preserve and secure. And right now we're not getting the job done in Washington.
Is the Chamber of Commerce involved in this primary?
No, I just mean in general that the lobbying interests that have said to us, hey, we don't typically get involved in primaries, but if we were going to get involved in yours, we're much more comfortable with somebody who's spent a lot of time in politics. Well, I don't understand what the founders would make of that. We have a film out where we talk a little bit about the thought experiment. What if the founders came back? Your listeners could see it at ben4nebraska.com, where we actually moved the U.S. Capitol out of Washington, D.C. and take it to Nebraska and say, I think if the founders walked down K Street right now, they wouldn't recognize this experiment.
That's ben4nebraska.com, ben4nebraska.com, people who want to support Ben Sasse and his race. So I'd like to endorse you if you accept my endorsement, sir, and I want to wish you all the best.
I am incredibly honored. Thank you. We're big fans of you at my house, and we're grateful for what you're doing to try to recover a constitutional sense. President Reagan regularly said that we're always only one generation away from the extinction of freedom. Our kids don't get it in their bloodstream. They don't get it by genetics. They get it because we pass along the American idea and the American dream and the American creed to our kids, and that creed is the Constitution, and it doesn't feel like our country is rallying around the right issues. So thanks for all that you're doing to teach it and spread the good word.
Well, everybody who I know who knows you there and at the national level tell me that you are solid as a rock. You certainly sound that way to me. You sound very earnest, and I want to wish you all the best.
I'm very grateful, Mark. Thank you for this and this vote of confidence, and thanks for your listeners.
All right, good luck. God bless. There's a citizen candidate right there who has a shot. A citizen candidate who has a shot. Backed by all the groups who are hated by Washington as well. And very, very popular and supported by Tea Party groups throughout the state of Nebraska. So that's Ben Sasse, spelled S-A-S-S-E, a citizen candidate. There's a real shot at this in the Republican primary in Nebraska. And you heard him. And you can do your own research. You can go to his website as well, ben4nebraska.com, and make your own decision. I've made mine. SSE, and he has a really good shot at winning the Republican primary, first and foremost. 4 months ago, he had 3% name ID. Excuse me. Now he has 40% name ID, which is really, really good. And he's a man that I have...
think of myself as I'm a dad and a father. I got 3 little kids, and my wife and I are blessed to be raising them a mile from where I grew up, and we want them to inherit a great, free, opportunity-filled America, and we got a mess on our hands.
We do have a mess on our hands, and we have a mess within the Republican Party. So, well, there's a very, very important race in Nebraska, as there are in other states, in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate. And there's an outstanding candidate, a solid conservative, a constitutionalist, who is running, and his name is Ben Sasse, spelled S-A, great admiration for, and I wanted to introduce him to you. Ben Sasse, how are you, sir?
Great, Mark. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Now, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the country and tell people a little bit about your background and what your main issues are.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a 41-year-old non-politician. Most of my background has been in the private sector doing crisis management and business turnarounds, but I'm now in my 5th year as college president in my hometown, a 130-year-old college that was trying to go broke, and we've now been fixing it, and we're the fastest-growing school in the Midwest. But I think the main thing I think